Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us to the webinar today. It's a real pleasure to have you here to discuss the natural concern you may have regarding using AI for your patent practice. So for this session, we are very pleased to have Cynthia, managing partner and co-founder of Blueshift IP, along with our CEO, François Xavier. And so we are right on time, but I will ask you to wait a few more minutes before we start to let people arrive. So for those who are already here, you can feel free to ask all of your questions during the session. There is a tab, question tab on your right-hand side, and you can, of course, ask the question. We'll try to save some time at the end of the session to answer them. And if we can't, we will be pleased to address them by email after the session as we usually do. So feel free to write. There is no silly questions, and we'll have to answer.
Thank you, Thomas. So we will start. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are very happy to have you today. And we are here because we all believe that AI is an amazing opportunity. And it's also a buzzword, which reflects very different realities. And so I think that being clear on what we mean by AI, what are the risks involved, and how to mitigate them is critical to be in a position to embrace that opportunity. Today, we are super happy to welcome Cynthia. Cynthia, I let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us. We are here to talk about AI, which is a topic that I have long been very interested in. I was originally a computer scientist, then did some network security design and architecture, a lot of security work. I've always been interested in how technology and the law play well together or more likely crash into each other. And I think AI is going to have a lot of interesting opportunities for us to see that at work.
And on my side, François, so I'm one of the two co-founders of DaVinci, and I'm also the CEO of DaVinci, and the co-founder and the CEO of Kili Technologies, the mother company of DaVinci. At DaVinci, we develop the patent copilot, and we invest a significant amount of our resources to build a secure, confidential, and trustworthy copilot to help practitioners deliver better patent faster. And to start today, I will give the mic to Cynthia that will help us understand a bit what we speak when we speak about AI.
Yeah, this is the biggest question is everyone's very full of buzz and excitement about AI, and we don't always stop to think about what does that actually mean? It's a little bit like saying we're using math. Well, great. That tells us we're not talking about Shakespearean sonnets. We're not talking about federal court case law. But is this figuring out the tip at dinner? Is this doing differential calculus for small particles? What kind of math? For the IP practitioners, we're probably pretty used to saying, oh, you want an IP lawyer. Does that mean you want a copyright attorney or a trademark attorney or a patent lawyer? Or someone that knows something about trade secrets and employment law. It's the same kind of question that we have to ask ourselves when it comes to we're going to use AI. We need to ask what specifically is the system providing to us, and how are we going to use that? we're going to dive really into the deep end here and assume you've already asked that question. And our goal is to help you be better about having an enlightened conversation with the technology providers to make you comfortable using AI, and to making sure you're getting the right answers that you need to be comfortable with deploying this in the real world with client data or whatever other kind of data you choose to put into it. But we do encourage you to really think about what do they say when they're saying we use AI? What kind? And to be in your mind aware of what are your expectations of the system and what you think it should be good for.
When preparing the session with Cynthia, we listed 5 major risks associated with AI. So the 2 first one, confidentiality and security, are about what are the conditions for selecting a safe product, considering the nature of my data. The 2 following ones, so factuality and regulatory and compliance, are about how to use this product in a safe and compliant manner. And finally, the last one, it's a bit more prospective. It's about what are the consequences we can anticipate. What will it mean to be an AI-assisted patent practitioner tomorrow?
FX, if I may interrupt you, maybe it would be a good time to ask the audience what risk are they the most concerned about. So there is this poll tab on your screen, so you can vote, and this will give us precious insights to know where to focus the presentation today. So feel free to vote, and FX, you can move on while we do that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So perhaps I give you back the mic, Cynthia, to tell us a bit about what means confidentiality from your point of view as an attorney.
Yeah, it looks like so far confidentiality is actually in the lead in our poll in terms of things people are concerned about. I think most of us are used to thinking about confidentiality for client data in normal environments. We've long since stopped worrying about emailing clients back and forth. Hopefully we're smart about our attachments. Hopefully we think about our docketing systems and where our cloud secure data is and all of that. But when it comes to AI, there's another level. It's not that we haven't asked these same questions before, but there is this extra level of where is that data? Who's got access to it? What is it being used for? And who might get access to it accidentally? And those are some of the key questions that spring to the lawyerly mind is what's happening to my data when I use AI?
And so if we look back, it used to be wild. So 2 years ago, when OpenAI released ChatGPT, they were basically using every single user data to train and improve their model. So things have evolved a lot. The ecosystem is much, much safer today. And if you discuss with serious providers, they usually offer plans where you can find the right level of guarantees in terms of confidentiality. I think a way to think about the risk which are related to that is, for instance, about the prompt storage. So how do they store, what do they store, how do they store it, do they monitor it? So basically, who has access to this data, whatever the reason. A second very important point is about, obviously, do they reuse my data to improve their model? And if they do so, is that only for myself or for my firm? Or do they share these improvements with all other users? And potentially, last point is how do they protect their model against different hacking techniques that could give access to the raw training data, because this is something that happened in the past. Yeah, please go on.
On the lawyerly side, we're probably used to thinking about who am I sharing this data with? Should I be uploading a client's invention disclosure to LinkedIn? Should I be putting it on the email list that I subscribe to? Does it matter if I have a free Gmail account that I'm using for work? Because maybe Google's going to be scanning that and using it to either improve their own systems or create targeted ads with that data that maybe go to people I wish didn't have that information. Those are all concerns we already should be thinking about. AI related tools is just another area where we have to ask that question again. And the big one for the first part of the use of AI is, how do they improve their systems? It is so common just for systems to say, as you can see in the highlighted section, anything you give us. If you say, please create a patent application that has, a system for, catching mice more efficiently, they can use that. And then that might be something that they feed to competitors of our clients. It might be something that ends up being suggested. Oh, you're working on this. Have you thought about adding this feature? We want to be asking. I'm sure we all love reading terms of service. I'm sure all of us read every line. If we wanted to make that a little easier to get through, these are some key words we could search for in those terms of service. How do they train their models? We don't want to see that it's based on our content. We want to find out if there's a paid version that we can do to avoid that problem. We want to ask about whether they use the text that we type in. If we say, please create an application typed in the voice of, a senior partner or a second-year associate or a whoever for this kind of a client, is that input and the resulting output going to be something that they save and that they use in the future? Maybe, maybe not. Those are some key areas. I think the hacking piece of it relates to how safe is the data, but it's another thing that we want to keep an eye on, those terms of services. What are they doing from their side to make sure that the data is only being used in a way that's acceptable to us? And usually that will mean keeping it private, keeping it up between us and whatever computers we get access to.
To add to this, I will share the point of view of a vendor, and perhaps the first thing to say that there is no magic sauce. Start by working with a trustworthy AI provider, and if you are working with client confidential data, I would recommend to investigate a few points. The first one is about the way they process the data, and if the API actually retain this data after the processing, because this is typically something which is not required to provide a good service, and so you should make sure that they do not retain it for wrong reasons. The second point is, so do they reuse my data for retraining purposes, and will that benefit to someone else than me? A third point, which is perhaps less obvious to all of you, is about the monitoring. So when you offer a service, very often you need to have monitoring to detect either what we call abuse or analyze logs in order to be able to debug problems. And which means that someone has access to your data. And so today, Azure is the only cloud provider that actually offer what we call monitoring exemption, which is the only way to make sure that no one has ever access to your data. And so investigating this point is important. And at DaVinci, thanks to the long-term relationship we have with Microsoft through the mother company of DaVinci, but we have this exemption, and so we are able to offer that level of confidentiality to our clients. And finally, does your provider have certification? Because it's nice to make promises, but in the end, you need to have a third party that audits the promises and that actually certified that they are delivering what they're saying. So this is what we can do on our side, and I would not underestimate the importance of having what I call mitigation measures of the human factor. Usually when you have a breach, when you have an issue, a data leak, it's due to a human error. So taking the time to define policies, to educate users on how to use this tool, what kind of information is it safe to input, limiting the access to confidential data to people that that need to have access to this data. For is another example of what you can do on these topics. Let's jump on the security, which is, I think, the second most critical topic. Cynthia.
Yeah, so we know we want to keep our data private. That one's pretty straightforward. But we also want to keep it safe. And what does that mean? We're used to being able to say, okay, well, I trust my laptop, I trust the team's machinery, any computer that we have control over, we feel pretty confident about. Most of us at this point are pretty confident sending email that has client information on it. Now that we're using the cloud more and more, and by definition, if you're using AI, you're almost certainly using the cloud, we do need to be asking a little bit more. Data interception in transit. That's such an easy question to ask your providers. Is this safe when I send it over the internet? Because there are some pretty easy things that they can do to make that reasonably safe. The bigger questions are, what happens when the data gets there? What are the kinds of things that providers can do to address safety once the data is under their control?
So yes, so if we look back in 10 years, law firms moved for 70% of them their data to the cloud. There are huge benefits to the cloud, security benefits, because no private company can afford the security cloud providers are offering. Disaster recovery, because they can offer redundancy, and obviously the cost benefits of it. But as you push your data into the cloud, it's not anymore on your laptop, and so there are downsides. And so the first point is about the location of the data. So where is going my data? On which servers, and where are these servers? On which geographies are located these servers? How do they handle the data in transit? You mentioned it. It's vulnerable during this transit phase, so it's very important to make sure it is well encrypted. When the data arrive on the cloud, how do they handle physical and network security? And how do they design their solution to lower the risk of access to the data in case of breach? Because there are some things that can be done that make the solution all in all much safer.
I think on our side, on the law firm side, we are, just to be very clear, when we say using the cloud, what we mean is somebody else's computer. It means that when I sign up with a third party, they may have some computers involved on their site. They may also be using someone else's computers to store the data. So there are many more computers involved, and every extra layer means extra risk. Most of the time, we're going to decide that risk is worth it, but we do need to ask. Certainly on the patent side, we think about export control. If I don't have certain things in place, I can't store my data outside of the US. Super easy for a provider to set up something so that is taken care of, but we need to make sure they've thought about that. Super easy for a provider to take some steps to make it less likely that my data will accidentally be shared with my client's most hated competitors. But we need to ask, how are they setting up to prevent data leakage? So there are some things that are fairly straightforward, but these are the kinds of questions we need to be asking is, what are you doing about data location? What are you doing about leakage, especially leakage between client data?
Thank you, Lucia. So I can share you what we can do on our side to actually offer the best technical solutions. You mentioned the location, so obviously make sure they can store the data where you need it. At DaVinci, we offer 2 locations, one for the US and one for Europe, so that we can respect export control laws. Another good way to start is looking at the cloud provider. So law firms didn't choose Azure for no reason. Huh? Azure is the most secure cloud. They hold more certification than any other cloud provider. And I believe this is the reason why law firms choose majoritarily Azure. So making sure that your vendor operates on a cloud infrastructure, which is actually Azure cloud, is probably safer than operating on another cloud. When your data on the cloud, you have several options, and typically, so it will become a bit technical, but you have multi-tenant cloud and single tenant, which means that you share the space with others or you have your own space. So at DaVinci, we operate on our own space, and I think this is something you should require from your providers because it makes risk of data leakage much more under control. And you should also consider how do they make sure that client data are separated in different buckets. You have different ways to do that. It can be logical separation and physical separation. And at DaVinci, we have 3 logical levels of separation and a physical level as well. And by combining these 2 approaches, we deliver the safest way to protect the data in case of unauthorized access to the application. So obviously, data should be encrypted. And once again, certifications are the only way to actually confirm that the provider deliver on the promises. There are 2 certifications to know, either ISO 27001, mainly for Europe, and SOC 2 Type 2, mainly for the US. We have both. And this is the only way to make sure that your provider adhere to the most demanding policies, have in place physical security measures, encryption, penetration test, and also organizational measure on their side to handle what I call the human factor. And they are audited to prove that every year.
This is an area where it's helpful to think about what are you using the AI for? And in theory, we should be doing this with all of our technology solutions. But taking docketing as an example, we've got a deadline management system. Some law firms might say, you know, I'm just using this to track publicly available data. It doesn't matter to me so much if someone else accidentally gets access to when a deadline exists. Other law firms might say, oh my gosh, no, we're actually storing invention disclosure forms. We're storing things that haven't been filed yet. We really want to make sure there's full segregation of all of that data. We don't want that accidentally being leaked to someone else. So no vendor is perfect. Everyone is going to have a slightly different configuration of things. They're all going to say it's awesome. Thinking a little bit about what you're using this for, what data you're handing over to them, what the job that you're asking them to do will help make sense of what are the protections that they have in place, and is that good enough?
Thank you, Cynthia. Let's now jump on how to use a tool once we have the safest conditions we can have to actually work on a tool. And we will start.
Yeah. This is where it gets really good, because up until now, we should probably have been asking these questions of all of the tools that are available to us. But specific to AI is this question of factuality. Is it actually true? And the problem is humans are really good at asking a computer to do something and expecting the computer to do what they meant instead of what they said. And this is a really important distinction because AI, especially when it comes to generating text, AI is not about coming up with the truth. It's about coming up with something that seems to match a pattern. Now, that can be super useful. That's very powerful, pattern matching is. But it's not the same as asking if it's true. And I think that's a big question for us to keep in mind is what are we counting on this for? Would we trust this to a summer intern? Would we trust this task to a first-year associate without any review? It could look really good. They might have got some really great templates, but we need to still review it. And especially for AI, there is this sense that it just looks so put together. It just looks like it's such an accurate thing. We still need to understand that it's a tool that has some growing pains. It's a lot better now, but we've all seen these headlines. We've all seen things and said we don't want to be the one who's embarrassed like that.
Thank you, Cynthia. So yeah, I will not tell you the story you already know, but because the scandals are very well known, and I'm sure you understand the risk in terms of loss of credibility, of trust, the financial impact of all of that, and the legal complications that will come on top of that. To share a bit the view of the technology builder, what is very impressive to see is, so 2 years ago, these models were really inaccurate. So ChatGPT was something had something like 30% hallucination rate. And as you can see on this table, today they are able to deliver a model which is at 3% hallucination rate. As you can see, the spread between providers is extremely significant. So first consequence of that is to rely on partners which are working with the best technologies, because these technologies are evolving very fast. It's very hard to solve this problem. These are very complex problems, and it has been easy for, relatively easy for OpenAI to go from 30% to 3%. But getting below this 3% is really a tough challenge. These problems are related to the nature of the model. What they do is that they just calculate what is the next most likely word to display. So first thing is it's very hard because this is the nature of this model, to be creative and to be statistically accurate, but not from the point of view of the factuality. The second point is that it's heavily dependent on the quality of the data. And so almost the only way to work on that is to improve the quality of this, what we call the training data sets. So increasing the size of this training data sets, making sure it's diverse enough, making sure it's complete enough, and that the quality of this data is extremely high. And to give you ranges, it costs millions to address these challenges. For a company like OpenAI, spent hundreds of millions increasing the safety, the accuracy of their model. And here as well, on this topic, there is no magic bullet. Let's be very humble on this topic. But starting by relying on a partner that can afford this critical work is a good way to start. At DaVinci, we are very familiar with these topics. Actually, the core business of Kili Technologies, so the mother company of DaVinci, is to build and sell very high quality training data sets to these companies. So our customers at Kili are Mistral AI, SAP, or the Department of the Defense in the US. And we help them increase the quality of their training data sets. So as a vendor, we leveraged that knowledge and to make it available within DaVinci. And so we have models which are dedicated to increase the quality of what is generated, to assess that quality. So for instance, we are able to detect and to prevent the use of what we call patent profanity terms, which are abundant in generative AI models. We've developed also models which are able to assess the level of support of the claim. So we measure the distance between the reformulations by the model and the initial set of claims, for instance. So this is technically what we can do from a vendor point of view. And I think there is something else which is less technical, but more from the the design of the product point of view is to rely on tools that place the practitioner at the heart of the action. So which are not making magic, tools which are not making magic, which are really giving full control to the practitioner, using AI as a tool, as it has to be. It's a tool that can help you, that can assist. And I truly believe that if a vendor comes with a magic solution, you should be very careful because they are probably wrong. And this is important. And finally, address the human factor. So I'm sure Cynthia will speak about it, but educate your users on the capabilities and on the limitation of these tools so that everyone has realistic expectations. This is very important. And as vendor, you can rely on vendors which are committed to educate their users as we do today.
On the IP side, I really appreciate the terminology here. Is it factual or is it a hallucination? I am sure we have all read someone else's patent, never our own, of course, but we've said, what were they smoking? This is not limited to AI. We often wonder what went into creating that, what went into deciding that was the thing you were going to file. It's the same kind of question that we ask when it comes to, is this factual? And the goal of these two slides is not to make it so that you sit and scribble, wait, was it llama 27 or 70? Was it a B at the end or not? The goal is to get you to be able to ask the questions of your providers. What models are you using? How much have you invested? We don't want to hear it was free, it was easy, it was off the shelf and super generic. We don't want to hear we didn't put any teamwork to that. We put all of our people on sales, or we put all of our people on customer support. We want to be hearing a little bit. Maybe we don't need to go into all of the details as to how the models were trained or what data sets they use, but we want to hear that they've put some effort into this and that they've put some thought into what is the correct model for the particular kind of technology that they're providing. We certainly don't want to hear this is the end all be all silver bullet that will do everything you ever wanted. It slices and dices and files your trademarks and takes care of your IDSs. We want to hear specifically, what are you using this model for? Do you have different models for different functionality? These are questions that I think are easier and easier for vendors who are really trying to answer accurately. And we need to be listening for, they've put money and thought and effort into this, and this does or doesn't match the specific functionality that I'm looking for. And I think if you can have that conversation, you'll be in a much better position to be looking at partnering with a technology provider.
Thank you, Cynthia. And let's jump now on the fourth risk, which is basically regulatory and compliance.
Yeah, this is one that has old as time, right? We've got people as far back as Luddites and Romans, and probably before that. Technology is coming. Is it safe? Are we allowed to use it? Is it okay? It's just like with faxes and switching to email and figuring out what the right tool is to use and is it safe. It does require a little bit more work on our part. It does require us to put a little bit more thought just because we don't have a lot of guidance yet. I do think there is reason to be optimistic. I do think, unlike examiners at the Patent Office who might still prefer to use fax, there are signs that the overall leadership is really trying to put some thought to what are the guidances, what are the memos, what should we be providing in terms of recommendations to our practitioners since they're going to be using these tools. And I think the fact that we're seeing any movement is very hopeful. You know, the pessimistic part of me says, yeah, all of these are probably out of date already because the technology's done some crazy new thing since Tuesday. So we do have to put some more work into it. But I think this is a reason to be cautiously optimistic, is people are at the Patent Office, Patent Trademark Office, are thinking about what should we be using and what is our guidance on how to use these tools.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've been very impressed by the speed at which organizations are trying to clear the way and to provide the guidance. So obviously, this guidance are far from being perfect answers. I know that a lot of people have very different opinion on this, on the value of this guidance, but still, it is clearing the way, saying that AI is a tool, and it has to be used as such. Perhaps two questions you could ask yourself when discussing with a vendor. So, is my vendor committed to follow these regulations and to adapt as they move? Because there are definitely ways to support this regulation in the way we design our tools, in the way we are able to provide potentially proofs of what has been done by the machine and by the human, for instance. And another question is, when working on this tool, is the practitioner really in control of what is the output and in the way to use it in its work? And finally, we will jump on the last risk, which is about the societal impact of the technology. And Cynthia, if you want to share your view on the questions it might raise from your point of view.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my Luddites and my Romans. That everybody has always asked, oh my God, new technologies are going to take my job. Will I be okay? And I think that we see a lot of headlines out there that are very fear-based. Oh no, this is terrible. What's going to happen? I think we will all be in a much stronger position to practice, to do our jobs, and to work with our clients. If we can acknowledge, sure, it's a little scary. Sure, there's some uncertainty. It's changing fast. We have to be a little bit more proactive in terms of thinking about what we do or don't use. But we also want to be using these tools in a smart way. Nobody at this point would file a brief or an application or a mark and say, oh, I didn't run spell check on it. Oh, I didn't run this standard procedure for checking. I didn't go through my checklist to see if everything on here is the way it's supposed to be. There are some very basic tools. We use grammar check, we use spell check. We don't think about it. We also don't blame our mistakes on spell check, usually. We're usually pretty good at saying, oh, shoot, I didn't reread it. I put the wrong word in there, or it changed that to a different word. And that's the same position we're in right now. I don't think at this point in the near term, any client is going to say, I'm not hiring a lawyer. I'm using ChatGPT. Most people are going to make the decision, am I hiring an attorney or am I hiring an attorney who uses AI? They're probably going to be technologists if they're on the patent side of things, and they're going to be asking, what did my lawyers do to figure out if they should or shouldn't use a particular piece of AI? And there is an opportunity there for us to really support clients in a very powerful way by saying, this is how we've done it. This is what went into our decision-making process, and not, we were too scared. What if it's not like spell check? So there's these pros and cons in any business decision around what technology we use. But I think in AI, there are some really positive opportunities here to say, okay, yes, we need to be mindful of how we're using it. And yes, we're also going to use it. It will change our practice. But again, so does every technological change we've ever had as humans.
I fully agree with what you shared. I truly believe that the future of patent prosecution is definitely AI-assisted patent prosecution. Still, there are a few risks which are, I think, worth not answering, but at least thinking about on what might be the impact of the technology in the way to develop, to maintain and develop skills, and in the way to organize the work to be done, in the way to define our offers as a business. And so let me share a few of these questions. So typically, does the tool you use develop or might develop over-reliance on the AI, which can drive, obviously, errors and their consequences, which can drive also the erosion of the skills of your team members. And so how does the tool place the practitioner in a position to actually, on the contrary, develop its critical thinking and develop its expertise on its field. On another aspect, do we understand where the AI actually perform and how this might create opportunities in developing what I call human-machine complementarity? So giving to the machine the simple task, the easy task, and keeping for the human the most complex one. How do we adapt our working workflows? How do we adapt our operations to take the best out of this human-machine complementarity? If you think about the way firms are organized today, I think there is a question around how do we develop talent within the firm? How will we train the future junior practitioners today to become good practitioners tomorrow in a context where AI capabilities are dramatically improving every year? And so how do we develop a culture of adaptability to these technological evolutions at the firm level so that you can develop your talent and grow as a company, taking advantage of that amazing opportunity to make productivity gains?
I think in some ways that attorneys may not even realize it, but we do have experience in making these decisions. We already think about, is this something that a patent attorney needs to do? Could we get an agent to do this? Could we get a paralegal to do this? What is the skill that the client needs from each of us on the team? And who is the right person to deliver that? Certainly, there are plenty of areas where it's really important to have a human interacting with another human and explaining, especially in areas like patent law, especially in areas with trademark where there are business decisions to be made. There's a lot of opportunity for the humans to be involved. But there's also plenty of stuff we don't actually need a human to do. And that's not where the best work is anyway. And if we could be shifting our human resources to work more in those areas where it matters, where it's valuable, where we're going to be training an associate on something that shows that critical thinking, or we're going to be showing a client that we're proactively reaching out to them and taking certain steps. We do some of these already. AI is another member of the team. We don't usually think of spell check as a member of the team, but there are ways in which the tools are there to support us and our clients, and we should use some of the thinking we already apply when we're looking at the technology that's now available and becoming more available.
Yeah, and if we look at the last OpenAI demo about Sky, it might actually become a true colleague. Yeah, and yeah, and perhaps on last point on that topic is about AI might change the structure of the market and the repartition of the job between, as you said, different seniority level and skills set within a firm. It might commoditize a part of the job, and so it might ask you to reconsider where you want to put more energy to remain on a business that is a high margin business. And it might also potentially impact how in-house consultants and external consultants collaborate, which part of the job they do on their side. So here again, there is no magic bullet. We have to be very humble, but we have a very strong belief that we share with Cynthia that AI is here to assist, not to replace in any case. AI is very good at some task, routine task, simple section in a patent. It can also help a lot in gathering very deep and complex technical knowledge and make it available very rapidly. It can help gaining creativity and sometimes being smarter by leveraging these skills in the way you formulate your claims sometimes, and it can help in making a better job. So working with a vendor that share that belief, I think, is very important, and that build tools which are really embedded into the workflows in a manner that makes them assistant to you.
I think on our side, all of that is very true, and it's just so important, I think, to be aware. This developing AI proficiency, we can't just go with whatever the buzzword is. We can't just go with whatever the headline or the horror story is. We should be a little bit aware of what the tools are that are out there and think of safe ways to test them and figure out, does this work for my practice or not? What are some of these routine tasks that maybe I don't actually need to do, but that need to be done accurately and well and repeatably over and over and over again? Thinking a little bit more about what are the tools that are out there and being a little bit more proactive, I think, is going to make a big difference to our practice and to our ability to impress our clients and to be collaborating meaningfully, regardless of the specific area of intellectual property that we're in. There are ways to use these tools creatively, and I think if it's worth it to all of us to do some thinking about what area of my practice could I get some help with, in the same way that we think about, should I have somebody answering my phones for me, or should I always be the one to answer all of the firm's phone calls coming in? In the same way that we think about, when is it the right time to bring on support staff? When is it the right time to hire? We should also be asking, when is it the right time to bring on AI?
Thank you, Cynthia. And, to conclude a bit, what we build at DaVinci is a copilot, an assistant, which is designed to be your trusted AI copilot, fully integrated within Microsoft Word, so that there is no disruption in your workflow. It's designed to help on the preparation stage, so typically gathering information, summarizing documents, and extracting definition, for instance, of specific terms you would like to clarify before starting your work. It's here to help you on the drafting part, on the iteration. So when you get feedback from your client and you need to amend your claims to make that easier, to amend terms within the document. And finally, providing support also in answering the office action by getting rapidly clear summary of the invention, the prior arts, the office action itself, and an analysis and suggestion on how to handle it.
And I think this is a useful image of what it actually looks like, sort of demystifying a little bit.
Yeah.
I think we probably have had email exchanges with team members where we're trying to figure out, did the client give us enough to come up with more dependent claims? How do we get more information out of the client? We've probably all had one or more paralegals who said, can you just put together a shell really quickly, the template that I can use to fill out the office action response? If we can use the tools to come up with some of that prompting for us. Here are some things that you might ask the client. Would any of these dependent claims work? Here are some things that your paralegal can do other useful things with their time than create a shell document for you. Here's the template that you can get started on. It's always easier, I think, to criticize something that already exists than to start with a blank page. And so to have the computer be involved in helping us and providing the tools that make us more efficient, make it easier to get in there and get going is pretty exciting, I think, on the tech side. But I do think it's important to see this is what it looks like. And it doesn't matter which system you use, there's plenty of tools out there. But having a concrete picture, I think, is somewhat helpful. This is really a chat-based system in the same way that we exchange a bunch of emails in our regular practice.
And if you want to get access, feel free to click on the link or to reach out. We'll be happy to give you access so that you can assess by yourself the helpfulness of the assistant. Thank you very much for being here today. Thomas, I give you the mic.
Yes, thank you very much, FX. So yeah, you feel free to click on the link. We'll be happy to onboard you in a free trial to test yourself. And of course, feel free to reach out for any questions regarding the webinar, and we'll be also really happy to answer. And so thank you very much. We hope to see you in the future webinar we're going to be streaming. And thank you again, Cynthia, for your great participation to this webinar. It gave us a lot of precious insights on the practitioner side. So it was a real pleasure to have you, and we hope we're gonna do other one later with you. Thank
It's a
you
great
so much.
conversation. Thank you for having me.
And of course, you will receive the deck after the webinar. You will receive the recording of the replay, so you can share it within your organization. So I will take care of this right after the session. So thank you so much for being here, and we hope to see you soon.
Do we want to address a question, Thomas?
Oh, sorry. I thought we were running out of time, but okay. We have one question from Bruce. For if Bruce is still here. So how do you deal with patents that are issued but not actually viable? So
Not sure if he means
Me
patents
neither.
that
maybe
maybe
linked to the
training data.
factuality. Bruce is typing, so he will give us more and more insight.
Yes. Yes, training datasets are based on actually issued patents. And so we don't use for training purposes patents which are not published. And so I guess your question is about the quality of the training set.
I guess it is a question about stale data. If you trained on a bunch of patents and then one of those later on gets invalidated, or in some litigation it turns out that that was a terrible patent, do we have bad data in a system because the data is mutating over time? The data itself is changing and people are getting feedback on it over time. At what point do we ever go back and look at it? I would imagine that this depends on how much data there is, and that if you had thousands of patents available, if one or two of them or some percentage of them were not valid later, then you'd have a way of dealing with that.
Yeah, I think this is the main answer. So to give you an idea of the size of the training set, we train these models on all patents published on Google Patents. So we have millions of patents in the training set, and so this is, I would say, a very small part of the training data set. And once again, in the end, the tool is just an assistant that provide suggestions to you, and this is in the end of the practitioner to actually take that material and fit it to the work he's working on.
Oh, there's a new question. You want to take it? We are 10 minutes out of time. I mean, we're here, so. I
actually think this is a really interesting question, because we are starting to see systems that make it a little bit easier for an individual or a law firm to set up their own LLM. Often, in my experience, this requires a high level of non-billable technological effort to figure out how do I set up my own LLM and get it trained at the firm level. It would be actually really interesting to hear from technologists how you guys approach this. But certainly it would be nice, instead of having a spreadsheet that my partner and I refer to, this is how we deal with this kind of a rejection. It would be great to have a system that looked across the firm's filings and said, here is an office action written in the style of your law firm to deal with this particular challenge or this rejection at the patent office. Sometimes I think that would be pretty straightforward. You set up a private LLM, you feed it not just, publicly available data, but also the specific client information that our firm has provided, and you promise us you're not sharing that with anybody else. I think there could also be some technological challenges in that. And does a one client really want another client's arguments in there? Probably it's fine. But do you offer this as a service? Are you familiar with approaches that customize at that level?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, because so once people feel safe about the basics, they are wondering, so how do we fine tune it to me? how can it learn from my usage? So there are different ways to do that, and we accompany large firms on this topic to first work on customizing the existing prompt to make custom prompts. So basically, custom ways of asking the model and custom ways of orchestrating the thinking process of the model to make it fit better with the style of a specific attorney or the style of a specific client. And there are ways to go deeper, like what we call fine-tuning a model. And these are things we are today discussing with a few firms, very large firms, but we are not yet at clients are not yet at the maturity stage that justify such an investment to be able to fine-tune a model to their very specific context. But I believe this will come for two reasons. It will become cheaper to do, and this is definitely this will be definitely extremely beneficial to law firms or to corporates which are very which are big and which have a specific DNA they would like to further develop and maintain. Perhaps the last question?
Oh, I think that's it. We don't have any more questions, so maybe people will send us an email. So we can conclude here. Thank you again, Cynthia and FX, for this very cool webinar. We see you all the next session.
Thank you
so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.